Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Real Parables. It is such a great thing for us to be able to share this time with you and to be able to walk through these modern day parables. If you're new to this channel, the basic idea is we take movies, popular family friendly movies, and we try to look at them as modern day parables. We think that if Jesus were, alive today and he wanted to teach timeless truths to whoever he was interacting with, whether it be a crowd or individuals, that he would use things that people are most familiar with. And in our society's vernacular, that is movies and TV.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some modern music would be a part of that.
Musicals.
Yeah, musicals.
Definitely.
But so that's what we do. We try to look at these movies that come from Hollywood. These are popular movies. Well, that can be debatable, I guess. Legend wasn't really.
I'd say 90%, maybe 80% of our movies are popular. The others are just kind of random movies that
Random movies that I loved as a kid, and I need to share them with the world.
Yeah.
Like Time Bandits is still one of my favorite movies, and you thought that was really weird.
It was pretty weird,
but it's a great movie, and I think we had some pretty good discussions that came out of that too.
I think so.
Yeah. So today we're talking about a movie that I don't know it wasn't as popular as it should have been.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
I think we were saying that we think another big release happened around the same time, so it didn't get as much attention.
I think there was a big Disney Pixar release. I forgot to look at the actual release date.
I think it was 2014 is when this came out.
But there's, the movie that we're talking about today is Rango. Rango came out in 2014. It stars Johnny Depp and who else? There's some other big names in there too.
Not that I can name off the top of my head.
But there's some other big names that are in there that are playing these various characters. Rango, as played by Johnny Depp, as I said, is a chameleon who's lived a pretty sheltered life.
Mm-hmm.
This is a family pet, who lives in his little aquarium. That's pretty pathetic. Like, if you know anything about chameleons at all, the environment they were keeping him in was awful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not the kind of environment chameleons like. So maybe he was better off not being with that family. But he finds himself in throughout this movie in this kind of identity crisis. He wonders how he's going to stand out when it's his nature to kind of blend in, and when he winds up in this frontier land that's called Dirt, he takes this kind of transformational journey, from being kind of just an actor
mm-hmm.
to genuinely wanting to help people. And though at first, like, he's just kind of role playing, through a bunch of different situations and encounters, like I said, he's forced to become a real hero. So that's the general overview, and this is the time where we typically give our spoiler alert warning, because this was not a hugely popular movie, but it is available. We watched it on Hulu.
Yeah.
But it's not the free; it's the premium
mm-hmm.
subscription. But I think it's also available on Amazon Prime, so you should be able to watch it there. But this is, once again, a spoiler warning. I mean, it is
Sometimes we forget to give those.
Yeah, it is almost 10 years old, so I don't know how much of a spoiler warning we really need to give. But, just in case you haven't seen it, now would be a good time to pause, go watch, and then come back. I don't want to ruin what is actually a very good...
It's a great movie.
Western. It's kind of a Western-y style movie. Told not quite like spaghetti Western, but more like the Apple Dumpling Gang kind of Western.
Yeah,
kind of silly.
Yeah, it does have that kind of that kind of feeling too, where it's a
Yeah.
little rough around the
Yeah.
edges, throwing some humor in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely some humor.
Doesn't take itself too seriously.
And if you want to search it down, if you get the director's cut of the DVD, there's actually because most of the people who are in this are method actors, they actually all wanted to act it out in person. So
Hmm.
you can watch the entire movie of the actors on a soundstage wearing, cheesy costumes and stuff that they just brought from home.
We'll have to do that sometime.
And I've seen not the whole thing, but I've seen clips of it, and it's pretty hilarious. So, uh, if you want to really experience it, watch it through the original way, then watch the other way on the director's cut of the movie.
Be fun if more animated films did that.
Oh yeah, it'd be great. Like Shrek having Mike Myers in there.
Shrek, the Shrek is as on stage would be funny in rough costume, just Mike Myers in green face.
Yeah. Wearing no pants. Oh, he has to wear his pants, huh? All right.
It's like is it kilt or is it pants?
It's pants.
Oh.
Yeah, he wears. Yeah, that's different. Different movie. We're getting sidetracked. We did that a few weeks ago.
We did do that.
All right. So Rango, like I said, he's a chameleon who also fancies himself an actor. You see this in the very first scene of the movie.
Hmm.
He, as a chameleon by nature, kind of is designed to blend in, and in a way, he does that through his personality too.
Yeah.
In wanting to be an actor, uh, playing something that he's not, and sometimes as people we like to blend in too. This is, I think, our first conversation point. We like to blend in. We don't want to be the standout person
Hmm.
in the crowd, and even though it's not necessarily a Christian quality, it's something that a lot of Christians want to do too. We don't really want to stand out. We don't want to. Um, Oftentimes, we don't want to be noticed as a Jesus follower because of some of the stuff that comes along, with being recognized that way.
Yeah.
The judgment that comes from the world and the
Hmm.
assuming that you're going to be one thing even if you're not.
Yeah.
And but this isn't who we're meant to be. We're meant to be bold in our faith. So this is kind of to get our conversation up and going. Can you think of a time when you were either bold in your faith or in turn chameleon-like in your faith, and how did people react to that decision?
I think I've just mostly been pretty bold about my faith. I've never been afraid to hide it.
Yeah.
Uh, I think some people's reaction when you first share your faith with them, if they're not used to people being that open, they're kind of they want to challenge it,
Hmm.
which has happened to me before. Uh, and for the most part, I just answers like, oh well, you can. It's okay if you have that opinion.
Hmm.
If you want, you can come to church and I can talk to you about
Find out for yourself.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if most people are want to respond that way. Whenever I'm pretty open about sharing my faith nowadays, I never have anyone come back at me. But I think it was more like in school growing up that
Yeah.
the other kids were like, because they hear what their parents tell them, and so
Yeah.
then they say that.
Yeah. It's from the teasing standpoint.
Hmm.
Yeah. Which adults can tease people pretty badly
Yeah.
too.
I was a pretty hard kid to tease. I didn't care what anybody thought about me.
Yeah. 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 I haven't really cared about what people thought. Um, there's definitely times like when I first came to faith, I was an adult, and I just didn't want to hear it. I knew what the comments were going to be before I even heard them. So for a while, I didn't really tell the people I worked with that I was in a Bible study and that I was going to church, and that I don't think I'd been baptized yet, but I was thinking about it.
Hmm.
And then finally, the head chef at this restaurant, I was his sous chef, and he was just giving one of the waitresses a hard time because um, we had usually the restaurant was closed on Sundays, but this was a special Sunday some sporting event kind of thing, and we were all going to have to work, and she was upset that she was going to miss church. Her dad was a preacher, and she and her family had always gone to church together. And that's the reason why she took this job, is because she wouldn't have to work Sundays. And the head chef was really giving her a hard time, just being a jerk.
Mm.
Oh, poor little baby has to have Sundays off. How do I even know you really go to
Yeah.
church, kind of thing. And then finally, I just kind of laid into him. It's like, well, I've been going to church too, and I'm kind of bummed that I have to miss it. And it's really not okay that you're giving her a hard time, because she's actually doing something with
Mm-hmm.
her life that brings her happiness, rather than the bitterness that you have. But I'm kind of a bold person, anyways,
Yeah.
so um, it doesn't really bother me to. And his reaction to that was kind of like in shock, because one, he's my boss,
Yeah.
and two, most of our conversations. I mean, we were pretty good friends, and most of our conversations were very lighthearted, friendly kind of thing. And I'd never really spoken to him. I didn't have the need to speak to him that directly,
Yeah.
and he was kind of thrown off by it. That's okay. Got his attention,
Yeah.
and then he started asking me questions down the road about stuff. At first, it was kind of like the typical, well, what Christians say they believe this, and what do you think about that? I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm new to this, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
You know, that's a great line, by the way. When somebody's trying to nag at your faith, you don't have
Yeah.
an answer that you're ready to give yet. Say, well, I don't know yet.
Yeah. It's okay not to know the
Yeah,
answer.
you say that's a great question. I want to be able to answer you in a more complete way.
Yeah.
Give me a couple days and I'll get back to you. Nothing wrong with that answer.
No.
Anyways,
It's a truthful answer.
it's very truthful, and it shows that you're not a know-it-all,
Yeah.
which is, I think, one of those false perception
Yeah.
ideas.
Well, as Rico or not Rico, I say Rico.
Can you imagine Rico in this movie?
Rico's a dog that a friend of ours
Yeah.
has. Uh, but as Rango is crossing the desert, going in this random direction, trying to find this town, he eventually finds uh, the town of a bunch of people that are kind of rough around the edges,
Mhm.
very different than he is. Uh, and he realizes that nobody knows who he is here, and he could
Mhm.
be whoever he wants. So he thinks, I'm gonna take advantage of this.
Mhm.
Since I am an actor,
Mhm.
uh, I will become the cowboy that this town needs.
Mhm.
And so he acts like he's this super tough gunslinger who is the brother of Jake the Snake.
Notorious villain.
Yeah. Which I don't think he realizes is actually a snake.
Yeah.
Uh, and in doing so, he's pretending to be this Western legend,
Yes.
this gunslinger, and throughout this story, he starts to realize that is actually kind of who he is.
Mhm.
I think being a pet chameleon, he never really knew what he was supposed to be, but by taking that walk of faith across the desert,
Mhm.
he he found who he actually was by
Mhm.
faking it. And I think something similar happens when you first come into Christianity. If you're not, or if you've been in Christianity for a while and you're trying to find your calling in life,
Mhm.
I think something similar happens as we go into that. I remember when I was uh, first entering adulthood and trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. I was a pretty shy person who didn't really like talking to people at all. But when I moved away to college, I thought, well, I'm gonna try to be
Mhm.
the kind of person that'll just walk up to somebody and talk to them. And I realized, hey, I actually can be that person.
Mhm.
I actually kind of like being this person, and it, that led me to eventually becoming a minister. And I think that just can go into anything. Like I found out a bunch of passions that I had no idea I had because I kind of faked it till I made it.
Mhm.
Do you have any kind of similar experiences in life?
Yeah, I think there's back when there was a point where I was kind of tired of the restaurant business, just because I was always, there's so much shift in what role I was having to play. Um, and you kind of get beat up, early on in your
Mhm.
restaurant career. And I just needed a break. So, I decided to go into construction. And I had a general knowledge of tools, 'cause my grandpa
Mhm.
was always in the shop building stuff, and I was always in the shop with him. And my grandpa had this, he had this mentality where he would say, "Be quiet and watch." You know, he wanted me to watch what he was doing. So in the process of that watching, I was able to see and learn some enough to know what kind of different saws were which. The difference between a level and a square. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I went on to this job and in construction, and really didn't know how to build anything, but I knew how to talk the talk. And it got me through that first week, to where I could start picking up on stuff
Mhm.
because I knew enough to get me started. And the same thing is true, when I became a Christian. My mother-in-law, before I was even a believer, she and a couple other adults, I guess, used to joke around that they were going to make me a youth minister.
Mhm.
This is before I had even considered going into youth
Yeah.
ministry or becoming a Christian. Even they were joking around about this stuff. But uh, pretty soon after I was baptized, I think it was probably like a week or two after, she asked me to lead the youth group discussion. No idea what I was doing. No concept of how
Mhm.
to uh, give a talk, a devotional.
Yeah.
And I wish somebody had recorded it
Mhm.
to see how much, pardon the expression, how much talking out of my butt I was doing. Trying to sound churchy, but
Yeah.
it rolled into something else, and I kind of found my style. Especially with through storytelling.
Mhm.
And um, so I think I faked what I wanted to do until I figured out how I actually wanted to do it.
Yeah. I think it's cool too that God kind of just transforms us in that
Yeah,
way. Like he's like, "Oh, you need to be kind of a chameleon in this sense
yeah,
to do
yeah,
this one thing."
yeah,
Oh, look, you actually like that.
yeah, yeah. I think I've said it before. That I was always a shy kid. I would intentionally fail classes because I refused to give presentations,
Mhm.
because I refused to talk in front of people. I mean, I was perpetually afraid of standing up and talking.
Mhm.
And I, I mean, I get nervous when I have to talk, but I've never been paralyzed by fear.
Yeah.
And that's just a God thing, that even that first time talking in front of a bunch of teens, even though I didn't have any idea what I was doing, I was still able to talk. I wasn't
Yeah.
paralyzed by fear of not having an idea what to say. And I think that's pretty cool. You mentioned in that, though, this idea of a journey of faith.
Mhm.
In this story, we see Rango. He starts off, doing his little spiel. He's acting out something in his little cage. Then they hit a bump in the road, and
Yeah.
they go flying off. He goes flying out of the back of the station wagon and lands. And then he talks to this armadillo that's been hit by a car previously.
I think it was the car that
Yeah,
that he was in.
yeah. So uh, he gets hit by, this armadillo got hit, but he's still not dead. So starts talking about a journey, because Rango is a chameleon. He's meant to be in a moist environment, but they're in the middle of the desert and it's dry. So Rango's whole goal in this moment is to get to water.
Yeah.
And this armadillo, starts telling him about how you get to this town called Dirt. You know, and so Rango, this person who's in severe need, is talking to a complete stranger who's you know dying possibly on the road, and he's saying all this strange stuff and talking about walking out into the middle of the desert until the end, until the day's end or
Yeah.
something like that. And he's telling him to go on this journey, and there's this point where he has to make the decision: well, do I go or do I stay here and wait? Because there's nothing good for me by staying here and waiting, but there's a possibility of something better over there.
Yeah.
So he has to make the conscious decision to take this journey of faith, right? So he's on this journey across the desert. There's hawks that are trying to catch him. There's no water.
Hmm.
It's hot. There's all kinds of dangers. It's unfamiliar territory. Territory. I don't know why I couldn't say that word. Um, but he knows that his only real chance of living is to make it to whatever that destination is that's over
Hmm.
there. So, he's on this a journey that in so many ways represents the journey that we're on as, Christians. We're on no matter who you are, whether you're a Christian or not, everybody is on a journey. The question we have to answer is, what are we hoping to find at the end of that journey? And that journey is going to be filled with all kinds of difficulty and danger, and a lot of times we don't really know what's ahead. Rango, as he's walking, he has no idea what he's about to come in contact with in his near future. He doesn't know what predator out there is going to try and catch him and eat him. He just knows that he has to keep on track and go this way. And if we're being honest, there's a lot that we kind of just have to take on faith in life.
Hmm.
We have to take it on faith that this journey that we're on has a destination at the end, um, a destination that's going to bring us all the things that we hope that it will. I think a lot of times we have our perceptions of what we think is going to be out there, but it's all just faith.
Yeah.
So um, if you had to describe your Christian walk,
Hmm.
your journey of faith thus far,
Hmm.
what kind of movie would it be?
I feel like it'd be a pretty boring movie.
Pretty boring movie.
I haven't had to face as much suffering as I feel like a lot of other people have, and I'm very thankful for that. I've
Mm,
had the benefit of having a family who took me to church every Sunday, so I was able to figure out who God was a lot earlier in life,
mm,
and that helped me a lot. So I have that to be thankful of. So in total, I think my story would be somewhat boring,
mm.
but it doesn't mean it wouldn't be without its struggles, because
Yeah.
I'm a human, and I've definitely messed up a lot in life,
Mm.
uh, and I'm very thankful that I've had God there. So maybe it'd be a one of those boring Netflix movie or shows that only get one season.
I think mine would be like a dramedy. You know, uh, there's a lot of drama. If you've watched this channel for listened to this channel for a while, or tuned into or any of our other stuff, I talk a lot about my life, and there's definitely some parts in there where there's a lot of sadness and drama,
Hmm.
and some of it's just drama as a part of everyday life. There's other parts of it that are tragedy. But there's in the mix of all that, there's a lot of good times and a lot of
Yeah,
laughing, a lot of jokes, a lot of fun. You know, and I don't think anybody's life is really just um,
all
all
fun
bad.
or all bad.
Yeah, but I think that I don't think I would label mine. I really would like to label mine as like a spaghetti western kind of thing, um, because that's one of my favorite styles of movie. But dramedy is probably more accurate.
Yeah, lots of sarcasm in there.
Uh, I
Mine
have
as
lots of
well.
sarcasm.
My grandpa is very sarcastic, and he has passed that along to me.
Hmm.
and it annoys my wife every day.
Yes. The blander and the drier, the better. Are you joking right now?
As long as I get a weird look from her, I know I'm doing it. I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
That's how you know.
Yeah.
Well, as Rango finds his way into town and earns this role of sheriff by surprise, he is tasked with his first job, which is finding out where the water went. Uh, the water's been stolen from the bank,
Hmm.
and they have to find it. So Rango decides to put together a possum, as he called it at
Hmm.
first, or a posse, and find this water. So as they're going through the desert, after finding a trail and following it, after a while they camp up for the night, and as they gather around the fire, one of the townspeople says, let's gather around and hold hands and pray to the spirit of the West.
Hmm.
And Rango's kind of like taken back by this. He's like, okay. And in the prayer, they thank the spirit of the West for sending them Rango, uh, and just talks about how blessed they are, and how thankful that Ringo's been sent to help them find this
Hmm.
water and save the town. And it's kind of cool in the scene. You see how much hope that Ringo has given these townspeople. And what's funny is the 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 townsperson who's praying even says, like, I've never been much for praying to you, Spirit of the West, but it just seemed appropriate at the time.
Yeah.
And I think this moment is kind of has a cool message of you don't have to be a hero, or you don't have to be a minister or a pastor to actually be an evangelist.
Hmm.
And I think Rango doesn't realize it this time, and I think a lot of times when we're evangelizing, we don't even realize we're evangelizing at the time.
Hmm.
But people like to think that they can't really tell people, like, they're not Christian enough to tell people about
Hmm.
Jesus, which is not true at all, because you can do it at any point
Hmm.
in your faith. Just I mean, the disciples were not
They weren't
school.
trained.
They were not trained to be teachers of biblical law or scripture. They were just fishermen.
Yeah.
They were the most random group of people, and they were able to be teachers. And so it does not matter where you are in your faith. You can always evangelize. And I think that's something that the devil likes to whisper in your ear, that you're not good enough
Hmm.
to, or you don't know enough to be able to share that. And what I think Ringo kind of realizes this moment is he gets to be that little bit of hope. He gets to share Jesus with them without even realizing that he is.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, they call it the spirit of the West in this movie, but they're talking about God.
Hmm.
It's kind of cool how it's just so on the nose in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. There's back to that idea you had about anybody can evangelize. There is a very big misconception about who the people who are meant to be going out. You
Yeah,
know, especially I think we have this perception that evangelism is only supposed to be done or is best done by the lack of a better term, the professionals.
the
You know,
clergy.
yeah. But that's just through history. That's just not the way it was ever meant to be.
Hmm.
Um, we're told that, in Matthew 28, verse 19, therefore go and make disciples of the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then it says to teach those new disciples to obey the commands I've given you. And that word in the original language that we see as disciple, it's meant to be a verb, and it's in some translation it's presented that way. But The way that you disciple people is by making new disciples
Hmm.
and by baptizing them and by teaching them the Word of God. You know, anybody can do that. Anybody can go out and uh, be a discipling person by creating new disciples through baptism and teaching. And it doesn't matter. I mean, some of the most effective evangelists I know are not paid clergy. They are people who volunteer and give their heart. I think of Ellen Banks. Ellen Banks is not paid staff, but you think of all the people through her life that she
Yeah.
has brought to Christ. Um, it's incredible,
Yeah.
and there's lots of people out there like that.
Yeah. I think people underestimate how valuable they are in God's kingdom.
I would even say, in some regards, non-paid staff, non-clergy, are possibly more effective as evangelists because they're less intimidating.
Yeah.
And I think there's in some circles there's an intimidation, when you hear the term pastor, or minister or reverend or priest or whatever. There's some intimidation, like um, I can't really be honest and real with them. But
Hmm.
to if you're talking about your friends and family, then that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So never let anybody tell you that you aren't qualified to be an evangelist.
Yeah. As Rango goes on that journey to find the water, it turns out that the water was not stolen by who they thought it was, and then the truth kind of comes out that Rango's not the gunslinger that
Yeah.
everyone thought he was. The mayor kind of exposes him for who he really
Mhm.
is, bringing
Jake the Snake,
Jake the Snake into town.
which is a pretty terrifying villain in this movie.
Oh, it's an awesome villain.
Yeah, yeah, he's literally a rattlesnake that has had his rattle replaced with Gatling guns.
Yeah,
I mean,
awesome.
pretty great.
It's pretty awesome villain. Uh, so as he's kind of exposed for who he is, and he walks out kind of exiled by the town. He comes back to that road that he originally was on, where he first took his first steps of faith
Mhm.
towards the town, and he has that memory of the armadillo telling him that one day he too will walk across the road,
Mhm.
and uh, Ringo takes those steps across the road with cars flying by. A really cool scene, and he gets across to the other side and just collapses. And I think it's just a really cool and honest representation of walking by faith.
Mhm.
How sometimes you never know where you're going to end up on your journey.
Mhm.
Uh, you might end up right back where you were, and you take that walk of faith, knowing you have to. You got to bite that bullet and get across that road to get to where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
Because what inevitably he's doing is he's going towards the spirit of the West. That's what his
Yeah.
mission is to find the spirit of the West, and he has to walk by faith to find that spirit of the West, and he does, and it is exhausting. He collapses on the side of the road, and I think it's more uh, a mental exhaustion than it is actual going across that road. But he finally does it, and
It's Clint Eastwood. That's great.
yeah, he finally meets the spirit of the West, and he's enlightened by his journey, and I think that is so much like such a good representation of just our testimony in general.
Mhm.
Is it is our journey through life. It is our walk through life, and the story that we tell of all the crud that has happened to us and how we
Mhm.
walked through it. And just as fulfilling and enlightening as that testimony is for ourselves, it is for other people too.
Mhm.
And getting to share that story, like I got to meet the spirit of the West. I
Mhm.
want you to meet him too. I mean, it's such an important part of our faith is that testimony that we had to go through, that story that we have to live through, uh, for some of us much rougher than others.
Mm,
Uh, just as good as it is for us to get through that is also great for the people who get to hear that story and get to learn from it.
yeah, I think that's, even the same testimony a church can make as well. Not just as the individual journey of faith, but an entire group of people on the same journey together in faith. I think about what our church is going through right now, and uh, we've been in this process of discovery for coming up on a year now since we really started. I mean, we were doing some stuff before this, but really diving into um, thinking about future plans and how we're going to make this next phase of life go.
Hmm.
And I honestly believe that 10 years from now, this is going to be one of those stories of faith that we're going to be able to not brag about, but be able to use as a testimony for the fact that God still works.
Yeah.
That God took a church that was over $1 million in debt, was struggling to come back after COVID, and struggling even more to find an effective way to reach the community around us. And then bringing all that back to where we are, 10 years from now,
Hmm.
I think it's going to be an incredible story of God acting boldly in the lives of people who trust Him. And that's really what Rango's having to do is he's having to trust the journey that he's on and trust the spirit of the West. And we, as a church and as individuals, are having to find a way where we really have to trust
Yeah.
because I think we realize that by our own volition, by our own abilities, we don't have the capability to do what we feel called to do.
Hmm.
And I think as we go through this, we're starting to see that it's only going to happen because God is leading us there.
Hmm.
And I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
I think it's a very exciting time for us as a church, for us as individuals. And I really hope that we're going to be able to bring some people along on this journey with us.
I think God likes telling good redemption
He
stories.
does. We need more of them nowadays.
Yeah.
As Scott Lambert likes to say, we need a win.
Yeah.
The church needs a win, and I think we can be that win.
Hmm. I got one more topic if you got something
Hmm.
else.
I have a closing thing, but that's it.
So, kind of a big kind of message running through this movie is this idea of water. Water is basically the what this whole town depends on. It is even what they use
Currency.
for currency, which is a funny concept of using the main resource of life as currency, which is probably a more appropriate way to do it, anyways.
Yeah.
Here I want to buy a pizza. It's 5 bottles of water.
Yeah.
uh, but in this movie, you hear the mayor tell Rango that water is life,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of talks about the importance of that and how he uses that water over other people. And the cool message we get from the Bible is this this parable that where Jesus talks about that he is the not parable, more metaphor, that he's the everlasting water. And Jesus really liked that imagery of water to communicate with people. And it's really everlasting water that changes this town. Uh, they're all transformed as soon as that water
Mm-hmm.
hits the town. It is a completely different town. This town of a bunch of grumpy, rough people are all joyful, running around dancing
Mm-hmm.
in the water. Uh, it's this really cool turnaround that you see. And right as the film ends, the last words the narrator says is, "And they will always remember the name of the one who saved them."
Mm-hmm.
And that is who Jesus is to us.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when Jesus saves us, it is hard for us to forget that name.
Mm-hmm.
And a cool thing I was reading about recently is when historians look back on uh, all of the writings and all the historical documentation of some of these big historical figures around Jesus' time. There are uh, there's a couple accounts of like Caesar and a couple of the other like Alexander the Great. There's I think like there's only like five like written historical
Mm-hmm.
documents writing about his life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then they were talking about how Jesus has like hundreds of different
Mm-hmm.
written things talking about his life,
Yeah.
and
Outside of
it's
the Bible.
yes,
Yeah.
and it's funny that the whole world wants to act like, or not the whole world, but a big portion of the modern world likes to act like Jesus didn't
Yeah.
exist, when there is much more documentation down that he did exist than others that they do consider existing.
Yeah.
And
Documentation from people who were not Christians.
no, uh, I just think it's so cool how back then not only is there that much stuff like they people wanted to write down stuff about Jesus because he was something special.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why they didn't write down a bunch of stuff about the other people because
Yeah.
even though they were big leaders, they weren't as special as Jesus was.
Yeah.
They didn't do as many things as Jesus did. And that line, "They will always remember the name of the one who saved them," is
Mm-hmm.
still rings true today
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, we all know who to thank. Once we
Mm-hmm.
know once we're saved, it's all Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in this movie, it's interesting. There's, like you said, there's the physical saving. You know, the fact that they now have water and they can have
Yeah.
life that comes from that water. But I love the scene where they're dancing in the water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that to me reminds me more of the spiritual life that they're
Yeah.
given. You know, that it's more than just, you know, life is more than just the physical. You know, there's a spiritual life, whether you're a believer or not. There's the in the Old Testament, back to the very beginning, where God creates mankind, and we're told that He breathed life into mankind, and in that idea is this word called Ruach, which is the idea not just of breath but spirit. So whether you are a believer or not, the Holy Spirit is already inside you.
Mm-hmm.
He's already there. But what happens in this is when they receive that living water, and if we want to, be a little bit more allegorical,
Yeah.
once they are baptized in the water,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a baptismal scene.
Yeah.
Once they're baptized in that water, they have received the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit was always there,
Mm-hmm.
just like a present sitting on the table, but now they have taken grasp of it and they've opened it up and they've received it. And then all that sadness and ugliness and just miserable
Mm-hmm.
life that they had, the existence they had, all that's gone because now they have that spirit that's alive in them.
Yeah.
And it's a great scene.
It
It's a
is.
great scene. It's a great movie. There's one line that I want to kind of close out on. Just I mentioned before this. The cast in this movie is huge. I looked it up. There's Johnny Depp, of course. There's Timothy Oliphant, who plays the Spirit of the West,
Mm-hmm.
but he's doing it in the form of Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Then you have Ned Beatty is the guy who's playing the mayor, and you have Alfred Molina who's playing, the Art what
Armadillo.
Aardvark Armadillo, the guy hit by the car.
Yeah.
Bill Nye plays the rattlesnake.
I didn't. Well,
He
not
plays Rattlesnake Jake.
not the not the Bill Nye the Science Guy. The
Oh, it's not.
it's the guy who plays uh Davy Jones and
Oh, well, that's
Pirates of
awfully
the Caribbean.
confusing.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was Bill Nye the Science Guy. 'Cause
No, not
that'd make it really interesting.
no.
But anyways,
He's a
so
British actor.
okay, all right. It would have been so much more fun if it was Bill Nye the Science Guy. But there's this line that the mayor, voiced by Ned Beatty, who's a great voice actor. You know, there's a point in this movie where we discover that the town mayor has been hoarding water through this drought, and he's doing this so he can use it as a way to exercise control over the townspeople. And even though the sheriff has, kind of a manipulative motive too,
Yeah.
you know, he is definitely aware of a universal truth, And this is what the mayor says, and I think it really hits. It's he says it's a universal truth that people need to believe in something, especially when they are living in desperate times. The critical question is whether or not the object of our belief can get us through the difficulties. And I think that's so appropriate, that we have, desperate times really drive people and they help reveal some of our core beliefs. What has helped you uh, in difficult times? Have you ever put your faith in something that um, ended up failing you during a time of trial, or maybe the opposite? Maybe you put your faith in something during a time of trial and you have a victory at the end of it that you can talk about. I was thinking about
Mm,
like there are some dark couple years in my family. I had my my dad passed in, I think it was 2009, and then that was followed a few months later by the passing of a nephew, and then a year later, my brother took his own life. And I never really had like my own suicidal thoughts, but the only way I can think about making it through, from a faith perspective, was I had to fully dive into my faith. I had Satan was definitely trying to push me out of ministry.
mm,
Not just this, but there was some conflict with the other pastor that was here at the church at the time. That was really pushing all my buttons. There was some, other stuff that was going on, and Satan was really trying to use that to get me just to give up, not on life, but on ministry. That I just don't have. He's trying to convince me that I don't have the ability to do this. That
mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready to handle all the strains and struggles that go along with ministry. And you know, I I'm not saying I handled it perfectly, but I definitely had to lean more heavily into what I really believe during that time. That was the only way that I made it through. Was being able to say without a doubt that God loves me, that He sent Jesus into my life for a purpose, that He made a pathway easy for me to go to school, to get training. He sent me to La Mesa for a reason. Those are core beliefs that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't going to let, as easy as it would have been, I wasn't going to let Satan push me away from that belief. He wanted to, he was
Yeah.
trying to, but um, yeah, diving into those core beliefs about who I was the only way I made it through. It would have been a whole lot easier in some regards just to give up, go back to cooking in a restaurant or
Mm,
working construction or something else.
yeah.
But that's not who I was made to be.
Yeah. It's cool that you get to tell that story over and over again.
Yeah.
It's a convicting story.
Yeah. Do you have anything like that?
Nothing, nothing that extreme.
Yeah. Well, other than that, it ended up being extreme, but
Uh, Closest to that is just probably uh death of my grandma. Uh, Came at a pretty pretty bad time. I was taking classes in school, working full time. Uh, the job I had at that time was really busy, and I worked really early hours. And uh, the night my grandma had passed, I was up late talking to her, and when I woke up late the next morning for work, I got fired. So it was just a lot that was kind of just of anger that was happening just inside me. I was just so angry for everything that was happening. Uh, but I was at the same time thankful because my grandma had been suffering a lot, and that job had been a pretty big stress in my life. So I was thankful that I no longer had to actually think about that job. Um, and then I also had the next month. Was when me and Lauren were getting married, so I had that to be thankful for. So I had a lot of bad happen in one day, but I had a lot of good things to have perspective on it to remind me that it's not all bad.
Yeah, no matter how dark life seems, the sun will come out.
Yeah.
The light will shine. Like we talked about last week, eternal darkness isn't really ever going to happen as long as God's in your life. As long as that unicorn's still going. Throwback to last week.
just watch Legend. It's so dumb. It's such a weird movie.
That's all I have. Rango's a great movie. It's worth a watch, even though it doesn't have Bill Nye the Science Guy in it. But next time, we're going to take a couple weeks off just because we have a new space. We have a new recording studio that we're working on. Some new meeting space that we're working on. And then we have some conferences that we're going to. So we're going to take about a month off.
Probably about a month.
And we'll come back or have our next episode of this podcast on May 13th. So that'll be Friday the 13th.
Very exciting.
And we are going to do, this is our first scary movie, right? Like,
yeah,
something to be related, like, that'd be like in the horror genre.
Or anywhere close to that.
Yeah. And it is, but it's still family friendly.
Yeah.
It's called Super 8.
Yeah.
Came out probably about 10 years ago. 8 years ago?
I think so. I think it's a Steven Spielberg movie, I think.
Great movie. It is probably in that genre of horror suspense.
Yeah.
Sci-fi.
If you like E.T., it's got similar vibe, but more suspense, thriller in it.
And the way that it's filmed, and I mean, it's just, Steven Spielberg is such a master when it comes to movie making.
Yeah.
And he did this one very well. So over the next few weeks, try and find some time to watch Super 8. I'm sure it's out there streaming somewhere. I haven't looked, but I'm sure you can find it. Rent it, whatever you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great movie, and we're going to do a deep dive into that. And sometimes we get ourselves in a little hole, because I'm pretty sure there's some stuff in there that we can pull out for parables, but I haven't watched that movie in several years.
Yeah.
So
might be another Turning Red situation.
I don't think it'd be that. 'Cause there's some stuff to talk about with Turning Red. We just feel that we need to have another person with us to talk about that. Female persuasion to talk about that. But we will get to Turning Red. Just, we need a bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us again for this episode of Real Parables. We will see you, or you will hear us, or see us again on May 13th, where we'll be talking about Super 8.
Or just re-listen to all of our other ones.
Yes. Go ahead and re-listen to the Legend one. I think that was a pretty good one, actually.
Yeah.
The discussion might be actually better than the movie.
100% is. We'll see you soon.
Bye.